Everyone go quiet for a second. I just want to see how much that fan's picking up. A little bit, but not much.
You're able to drown that out in post. You never know.
It might be there a little bit, it might not. It won't be too bad by the looks of
Put
it.
any music in the background, and you might be able to reduce it, because it's not that bad.
The thing is too, is like reducing it, the problem with reducing it is and this is what happened with mine, is you drain some of the
Yeah, you lose some of the lower
authenticity of
notes.
the voice,
Yeah.
and I don't like that.
Yeah, you want everything to come through.
You want it to come through.
I mean, like again, we're gonna do more of these. This is a great.
This
run.
is a little beta
Yeah,
test.
I think it should be fine.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, the last room was really loud.
Yeah,
But this
That
is-
sucks, yeah. Sorry guys, I
this
feel
is
bad.
quite
Like,
No, we got it
No
turned
worries.
off.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, we got turned off, it was all okay.
The sound was great in the last one.
Alright, so I believe we're recording across the board.
Awesome.
We are recording across the
Cool,
board.
okay.
Let me just double check the GoPro doesn't have any ugly debris in it. It does.
It does?
Yeah, I gotta put this chair. By ugly debris, I meant like things in the shot.
Oh, right.
Besides,
We could
yeah.
reach like, Emery, can you just go fix your face? Go fix your face in the bathroom and come back.
You just
Oh,
move aside,
I
move
don't
aside, move
really-
aside, move aside, we're good.
There we go, no, we're good now.
That's it.
Okay.
Here's a little sock puppet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Cool, face tracking is working, so we're good.
Cool. Okay. So
How's it going?
good, man. So we're recording a conversation now between you and I. And we've had a lot of these.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is about you. I want to learn about you. I want to learn how you got to the current version Emery.
Oh,
And
wow.
kind of briefly-ish go through what brought you to where you're at right now. What are you doing right now? What are you working on right now? Start with that.
Start with that. Okay. As I speak, right now I'm pretty immersed in one major project full time. It's called Space Age. So it's basically started off as a matchmaking company that I started at the beginning of this year with a good friend who also used to be an employee in another company that I was part of last year. And 3 or 4 years before that. So Space Age basically, the whole concept around it is this idea around exploring the future of work. So the way we kind of think about it is that right now work is a little bit still conventional, I guess, in the way that I grew up and sort of recognized that I didn't think everything that we were doing was 100%. The way that I thought it could be, like at a maximum level of potential. So there was like a lot of things that I think we could have, some of us could do better and have a more meaningful career and more meaningful life. And so, can I start over again? Sorry, I'm like totally aware of these cameras.
I'll
The
just
door
start
came
talking.
in.
That's and also
Oh, it was a good question. It's
try
like,
not to swivel.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
When you can. So like, what's up with Space Age?
Mhm.
What is it?
Yeah, let me just be like
don't-
pretend there's no cameras.
Don't
yeah, 'cause,
yeah.
I'm trying to overthink it, and it's like,
It's fine. We'll get into it, but
Yeah.
but
It's crazy how once the camera's pointed
it
at
does.
you.
Oh my God,
It,
yeah,
it
it's
makes
like-
a big difference.
and I never do
But
this.
like, what's don't think you need to add every bit of information.
Okay, just high level.
Like,
yeah, what
just,
am I doing?
just
Yeah,
high
yeah.
level. What are you
Sure,
doing?
yeah.
What's why'd you start? Well, let's start by simple questions.
Yeah.
What happened when the idea for Space Age launched? Why did you start Space Age?
Okay. So about Space Age, the company that I'm working
I'm curious,
at.
why did you start Space Age?
So it was an accident. Sorry. Sorry. Ask me the question.
Yeah, why did you start
Almost.
Space Age?
So, great question. Easiest answer is it was a complete accident. So I was in Argentina. A friend of mine in Toronto that used to actually work with me reached out, and he was looking to leave his company. So his company at the time was Upsuite, which is a directory for workspaces online. And he asked me, if I was interested in starting a new company with him. He wanted me to, become an entrepreneur in his own right. And I told him that I didn't want to be an operator again and sort of go down that path that I'd previously been on, working in co-working. And so
What excited you about that?
I actually didn't want to do it. Yeah, so that's where the accident sort of comes in. But I guess the thing that excited me most about working with Cole was just the fact that I'd be working with him. We'd had already a lot of conversations about lifestyle, and I was ready to sort of take on a completely new lifestyle. So I was sort of living it at the time. I was down there staying in an Airbnb and just figuring stuff out. I'd taken a break from being really immersed in work for, it was like 7 or 8 years in a row that I was just basically doing my own thing. Constantly, going from one project to the next as an entrepreneur. And it was nice to just sort of have time to just think and relax. And so when he reached out to me about Space Age, at the time there wasn't even a name for it, but basically there's this idea of like, hey, do you want to do this consulting thing with me where we basically work with operators and get paid to direct leads. That's what he was doing as a broker at Upsuite. And so I told him, maybe I'd entertain anything, just if we're going to be hanging out. And the idea is, to me, it was like, well, you know what? There's no hard costs. It's a service business, which isn't like I'm not crazy about, but it's in a space that I actually did have a lot of passion for. So I really loved the community aspect of working at Workhouse, the previous company. I loved co-working from the perspective of just sort of the concept around it as being sort of representing where I thought work should go, which is that you're not sort of locked into this 9 to 5 thing. You could come to work when you needed to. You're sharing ideas with other companies. You had this sort of baked in service system or hospitality system that took care of all the background stuff that you just as a company shouldn't have to worry about, and so and you didn't have the lock-in that a traditional lease would give you. So anyway, for all those reasons, I really loved co-working as a concept. I loved many aspects of as an operator. So I thought if I could work for companies like that again, and we could curate companies that we thought were doing the best job of that, I would be interested. I also needed money because I'm sort of on a path at this point where the resources are really important to me, not for myself, but for the ability to kind of be able to pursue some of these objectives that I guess I have at this point. And so I was thinking about all that when he approached me, and I said, well, I could put a bit of time into this project. I wasn't planning on it being a main thing. It was going to be more like a side gig or a side hustle. But I had continued having conversations, and then it turned into Space Age. He was working on actually a logo and a name for the company, and he sent me the name, and actually the name probably hooked me more than anything because he knew I was into space and all that stuff. So when he sent me the name, I was like, okay, I'm sold. Like, Space Age sounds awesome. I love the double meaning. The future of work was a concept I was thinking a lot about, so that it fit perfectly with sort of my mentality around working on a project that could support that mission. But that concept. And so it's evolved now. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling, but it evolved into what we have today, which is the company I'm working on full time right now. And yeah,
awesome.
That's
cool.
That's sort of how it happened. Yeah.
So how'd you get, as good personal as you want.
Yeah.
How'd you get to a point where you're, doing this entrepreneurial path? Has it always been in you? How'd you get from childhood to where you're at now?
Yeah, okay. That's a tough one for me because I'm actually kind of a black sheep in my family, I think, a little bit, where I didn't really have anybody that I could model entrepreneurship off of. I have family that's more military, and so for my dad and my grandfathers and my uncles and everybody that I kind of looked up to as a kid, they were all almost in the opposite direction. They went into a life where it was very organized and very, controlled, right? And then I sort of come along and I was like, hey, I don't get this world that I'm in. And so I just didn't feel like I tried all these things. I grew up on military bases. I went to cadets, and I went to, before that there was, other things like scouts and stuff like that, beavers before that, I think. But anyway, I was trying all the kind of things that felt a little bit like military, and I actually did when I was younger. I didn't think that being an Air Force pilot was the coolest thing ever. So I wanted to do that. Somebody told me that you have bad eyesight, so you couldn't even do that anyway if you wanted to. And I know now that that's probably ridiculous, but at the time I thought, hey, this sucks. The only thing I would want to do here, I can't do. So. Anyway, it doesn't really explain why I got into entrepreneurship. So basically, I grew up sort of just questioning everything. I was always, not really in school very easy to deal with in some ways. Like I was never like, difficult in terms of like being like a bully or any of those type of things, but I was definitely challenging to my teacher. I was a little bit of a class clown, and I was also always asking questions, and I was always asking questions that were uncomfortable, and so I think that's just always been in me. And when I looked around at like a lot of different organizations, like the church, and when I looked at school system, and I looked at my dad in the military, and I looked at sort of all the things that I sort of grew up in, I just questioned it all as being like, is this like the best we can do, and it was kind of, I don't know why, but I just had this sense of distrust for the system, that I was in, and I still, I appreciate it, but even today, I still have that distrust, for a lot of the systems that I find myself in. So I think that lends you to wanting to try to solve some of that stuff. When I was a kid, though, I didn't know it was going to be entrepreneurship. I thought it was going to be more like arts, or I don't know, even like maybe activism or something like that, like something political. And then I read a few biographies, and I was like, man, that's a really shitty life. Like, I don't want to do that. So,
can you think of any specific moment where you were like, man, this doesn't make sense? Like something, I don't know, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A specific moment where you kind of tasked to do something, or you tried something and it was kind of rejected, but you felt right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like something that made you go like, wait a second.
Yeah. Well, good question. Yeah. So, I'm just trying to think earliest times. I mean, so I guess like, for example, like we would have assignments at school. I mean, as a kid, right? Like there's different things as I get older that probably I could reference, but as a kid, the first thing I can remember, like off the top, was, like there's an expectation that I should have been doing certain things. Like I should be out doing a lot of sports, with my cousins and with my family, whatever. And I would always want to hang out in the house and like draw, and and just sort of hang out and just do stuff that was like kind of a loner, And so my family, like not my direct family, but my relatives would always be like, hey, like what's wrong with your son, kind of thing. Like, is he a sissy? Is he like, you start using like some of those type of words, like, is he like something a little off with it or whatever, and so I kind of grew up with that, a little bit of that challenge, and then it wouldn't stop me. I would just do my thing, but. And then even at school, like we'd get assignments and I would mess them up, kind of thing. So for example, like one of the assignments would be like, can you, draw and write a story of what you're going to be when you grow up. And I drew like myself on the top of this big hill, and like, I'm like, my job was like the leader of the world, and it was like, okay, that's not a job, dude. Like, but I thought, hey, well, somebody needs to solve the world's problems, and why not me, and so I had that sort of challenging the system from an early age, but it just came across like as being ridiculous. But to my peers, like my classmates, and then also my teacher would be like, hey, no, like, what occupation do you want to have? And I'm like, I don't want to have an occupation, like, I want to do, like, I want to solve like hunger and like, violence, and poverty and all this stuff, right? And so, like whatever that job is, right?
That was like projected as kind of
not
the right answer.
It wasn't the right answer. Yeah, exactly. It was kind of, unfortunately it was.
Do you think it's kind of cool that you look back and realize that that thing that you had in you back then is the thing? Do you feel that's still the thing that's driving you right now?
Yeah, I think I found it again though, because I think I definitely lost it along the way a little bit. Like I've always had like, I guess a stubbornness about, that my life was going to be good and that I was going to do some things that mattered. But I've definitely explored a lot of different things, like sort of versions of myself that definitely aren't that, that weren't, really living for other people and really weren't on a mission. It was more like, a lot of learning, but almost like too much learning, where I was just sort of trying to experience different things and trying to understand things, but not applying anything in a direction. There was no focus, right? And so I had a lot of that in my life early on, I felt a little bit like a dabbler. I would like go down a path and just sort of like try it for a while and then just move on to something else. I get bored, and I was always multitasking way too much, probably. But I definitely found my way back to that earlier version of myself that was like believed in superheroes and thought they were real and like thought that you could, you know, solve, you know, the big problems. And, you know, I'm in my 40s now, so it took me through my 20s into my 30s before I actually went back down that path, because in my 20s I was a goof, and then in my 30s I was like just trying to, you know, be a responsible grown up, and then, you know, then I was like partway through that I was like, okay, no, like I need to, you know, take it up a level.
How did you find your way back?
It was never one thing, but there was definitely some epiphanies along the way. I guess like a few things were like relationships. So I had some previous long-term relationships that put me on a path, and also some career choices that put me on like a parallel path that was very safe and very, you know, sort of predictable. And I was completely bored out of my mind, and I thought that this is not going to be like the life that I can live, you know. And I don't know why, because I think it, like I look at other people like my mom even, and they have a great life and they really enjoy it. It just, for me, it just felt wrong, you know, and I didn't know that until I was in it, and it was really safe and it was really like sort of on track, and it just didn't feel right, you know. So there's been those type of moments, and just trying to think what else sort of kind of put me on that path. One time there was a trip that I was on with a couple of friends, and I had broken up with a long relationship. I abruptly quit a pretty good career job, and I sort of sold all my stuff, all the stuff I had, kind of thing, and broke my lease, and you know, sort of left everything to, you know, its own devices, so to speak. And then I jumped on a trip with two friends of mine that were going across, you know, going into Europe and hanging out for a bit there. And I was like, this is awesome, I'm going to do this. And then I was there, and you know, I remember them recording me at this point one time, because you know, we were sort of videotaping the trip, and they were like asking me like, you know, Emery, like, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, I just threw my life away. Like, I remember that clearly, like being on a train in London, going between London and Birmingham, and I was on the train, and they were like pointing this camera at me, and they're like, yeah, just say one thing, like what comes to mind. And I'm like, oh, I just threw my life away. And that was sort of how I felt. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, I have nothing to go back to. Like, I don't really have, you know, a career, you know, anymore, and I don't have a relationship anymore in Toronto. And so that happened while I was on that trip. Actually, it was a huge epiphany, because I had this sort of, I guess, awakening moment where I was on the beach by myself. I had done this like trek away from my friends, and just went by myself for a couple of days. Literally a couple of days. I like took off, right? And then I was on the beach just sitting there, and it was beautiful. This was in Spain at the time, and I was just looking at the sunrise at like 5 in the morning or whatever time it was, and I just felt like I was touched by this higher power, and it was basically telling me, you know, if you serve me, I'll serve you. Kind of like, it felt like that. Like, it was this sort of like step into your better self, you know, who you're supposed to be. And if you do that and you trust, then, you know, you're gonna be put on this path that you really, you know, you really want to be on, right? And I just, like, all that wasn't said, but it was felt, right? And it just, I had like so much joy, and like I felt so like I felt like it's the first time I'd ever talked to like a higher power, or like the universe, or whatever you want to say. And I got a tattoo right after that of like 2008, because that was the year that happened, right? So it was like, yeah,
Amazing.
And that put me pretty heavily on the, like, sort of on the path to kind of go back to.
Do you think that dropping everything and diving into something that's not, probably a little uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and you don't know what's going to happen, like this trip, diving into the unknown, do you think that's a necessary part of reaching the levels that you're reaching? And do you think that led to this moment? Do you think that was a big part of it?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I think that there's what you think you're supposed to be, and what you think the world is supposed to be, and then there's what you are and what the world is, and they're so far apart. There's just like this massive gap between those two things, and you can't see the path to get to that other side, but you have to have faith that if I just kind of charge into the unknown, somehow there's going to be a path that will be revealed, right? And so that is sort of how I feel like my life is now, where I just sort of step into the unknown and just let life sort of take over, right? I put the work in, of course, too. I grew up with a healthy work ethic, and my dad, the military, taught him that. He taught me that too. But so much of like the magic doesn't come from the work. It comes from like, just being in the moment and just being in the flow and doing things that are, doing things that you think are the right things, right? Like doing things with integrity.
Absolutely. I had this moment earlier, and where I kind of had this understanding, this realization, like I was trying to tell you about exploring things and realizing things on a new level.
Yeah.
And I think everybody has that in them,
Yeah.
where they see the world a certain way,
Yeah.
and you know it. You can't necessarily explain it, but you know it.
Yeah.
You got your truth, and you
Yeah.
know it.
Yes.
And our hero's journey is being it when society is telling you something different.
Yeah, totally.
And do you feel that experience within you? Like, do you feel that you're on that journey of knowing something?
Yeah.
What do you know
Yeah.
about the world that society doesn't quite get yet?
Oh, wow, okay. Well, that's the Pandora's box for me, because like I think I 100% agree with you, first of all. I think we all know certain things. So I guess the best way I can describe it is probably the stuff that I'm really excited about working on now are the things that I just think, okay, so if I asked you a question, this will explain where I'm coming from, but if I ask you a question like, as a human being, what's the biggest problem on the planet right now? What would be your answer?
A lack of inspiration.
Perfect. So you have an answer.
Yeah.
99% of people, if you ask them that, they don't have an answer, and that's a problem, right? Because we should all have an answer for that question, because I think that's the purpose of us being here, is that we're taking advantage of all of this, amazing abundance and all the things that are on this planet that we were born into, and part of our journey and part of the quest is to move this whole world beyond where we are for those next people that are going to come after us. And so I came into this world where I see the world being scarce, and there's a lot of scarcity. Even though we do have a tremendous abundance, there is a perception of scarcity. And it's basically, we've just created it, and we create systems that perpetuate that. And so the thing that I know that other people don't necessarily all know is that we are moving to a place of abundance. And so my mission is to push us as quickly and as fiercely in that direction as possible. And there's 7 things I've identified that can basically do that efficiently. And there's others like the one you mentioned, but the 7 that I think I'm most capable of pursuing are the ones that I'm working on now. And so that basically, those things collectively change civilization from where it is now to where I think it should be before I leave this planet, or before I leave this existence. Right? And so that's the stuff that I want to do.
What are the 7 things? And are these 7 because you asked what's the biggest problem in the world today, and I said a lack of inspiration.
Yeah.
What's your answer to that?
Yeah.
And is that answer tied in with these 7 things?
It is.
And can you talk about what your answer is to what's the biggest problem and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. So biggest problem is that we have these really large civilizational challenges that we're in the middle of, and every civilization has them, every generation has them. So I recognize that we're not special in that respect. But we also have an incredible amount of resources and ingenuity and a connective sort of fabric in the world now that we've never had before. And so so if I go through the 7, that I've sort of looked at, and I kind of put them in an order for myself, because it's the order that I think I can attack them on, or I can tackle them in, is the first one is the challenge and the opportunity of work. So the future of work is the thing I'm working on now, and it's the thing that we all do most of the time. Human beings basically do a lot of work, right? Like we spend most of our time either sleeping or working. And so why are we doing it this way? Why is it 9 to 5? Let's question everything. Like, why is it 9 to 5? Why are people allowed to do jobs that they hate? You know, why is that even a thing? You know, why do we value certain things over other things? Why isn't beautiful art as much value as, you know, in this day and age as, you know, basically coding? You know, like there's different things that we're starting to run up against, and there is a lot of, I think, shifts in consciousness. We're starting to challenge all of these things, and so I'm really excited about the future of work, because I think work needs to be a meaningful pursuit, and you should extract value from that meaningful pursuit. You shouldn't have to just show up to collect a paycheck or get resources. I think that it's ridiculous that we've created the system around that. So that's number one. Number two is the future of enterprise. So the future of enterprise is something that is also really tied to work, but it's different. I kind of consider one being like in a job or being in like an occupation or being part of a crew. The other one's like, what is that mission of that enterprise? Like, why is that enterprise even in existence? Why is that organization on this planet? And so the future of enterprise, we shouldn't have companies that don't have a purpose, don't have a mission, don't have a stake in the grander scheme of things. So we aren't driven by more than just, you know, an underlying profit motive, but they're also driven by a people motive and a planet motive, and are, you know, tied together holistically with the rest of the planet and the rest of the world, because that's the only way civilization advances beyond like this whole, you know, competitive scarcity model to an abundance model that tells you that everything is possible and everybody can coexist.
Do you notice? I notice kind of a lack of resonance, and you can kind of feel it right away when a company starts and doesn't have that mission.
Absolutely.
And you can kind of see this is going to not work and it's going to fall apart. It maybe worked 20 years ago. But we're way more aware now.
Totally.
You know, and you can't build something without a foundation of like, I feel like a mission. That's how we're going to change the world.
You're right. I think there is still two types of companies on the planet. There is companies that even today are still being designed around, you know, the idea that I need to create money, you know, and I need to create wealth, you know, for myself. And that's sort of the motivation that I think goes into that business. And there's reasons for it, and there's good reasons. I mean, we all need, at this state, in the state of civilization where we are now, we all need, you know, resources to, you know, to basically purchase our living standards, right? And so that makes sense to me, but, you know, that shouldn't be the only thing, right? And so there's an opportunity to have way more than that, and I think the right people are actually recognizing that, and the right people are building companies now. It's not just that, you know, because that is sort of the old school way of just pure, you know, let's start this organization, let's try to make money, let's move on from there, right? As opposed to now, it's like, hey, like I want to go on a mission, you know, and I want to, you know, it's missionary versus mercenary. I want to actually, you know, solve a problem here. And I feel really passionate about this, and it motivates not just myself, but all of the people that come along on that journey with me. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that's definitely a huge shift, and it's an important one, right? But it can happen even faster. It can be even more dominant, and really it takes, you know, very successful companies to lead the way, right? And so, you know, you still have a lot of really big conglomerate businesses that are old school, right? And so they all need to be replaced as far as I'm concerned.
Awesome. What's number three?
Number three is the future of health. So that's what I'm really personally passionate about, because I've had health issues. Well, everybody has, right? But families had health issues. When I say health, I'm not talking about like the healthcare system, although that is part of the equation. But I'm really talking about like the wellness of a human being. So life in general, like to be alive, to be vibrant, to have vitality is such a gift, right? And if you have that, everything else is possible. If you don't have that, everything else doesn't matter. Like you're just chasing that again, right? Like I've been really sick in my life. I've had family members that have been really sick and friends, and they're not thinking about, you know, solving the world's problems. They're just thinking about like, let me get healthy again. And so we have this vessel in our mind and our body and our heart, and that stuff is so sacred, you know, and it's so taken for granted until it's gone, right? Or until it's disabled. And so for me, I've never taken it for granted, because I've always had challenges with it, right? And I grew up, for different reasons, I grew up with challenges. And so, you know, most of my life I had, like as an example, I had, not that it's about me, but this conversation's important, everything. And I'm like, I just settled for that. I was like, okay, well, that's the way things, I guess, are supposed to be. Until I learned more and more about health and wellness and about diet and different changes you can make to your lifestyle, to the point where now, like, I have probably some of the sharpest, you know, on a good day, I have the sharpest senses of most people I know. Like, my sense of smell is like completely different than it was back then, right? And I just settled for the fact that I couldn't smell things, right? Because I just could never breathe properly. So that's just an example for me, but I've seen it with other people too. So it's sort of like this idea of really understanding how important health is, and then looking at the different ways that we can augment the health span and longevity of everybody on the planet, right? And it's not just going to be using like the traditional Western style of, you know, critical intervention when you're at the worst and trying to like put salves on wounds and not really heal the underlying issues. It's going to be a really holistic endeavor. So it's going to touch our food. It's going to touch our, you know, our behavior around, you know, looking after our body, looking after our mind. Again, having a very heart-centered existence as well. You know, so really understanding, you know, what motivates you, because all of that stuff ties in. So health is huge. Like, I mean, it's probably it's so important, you know. So that's a big one for me. And, you know, again, if you look at those three things, like you look at changing enterprise, changing health, and changing work, that's a good run, you know.
So you're already changing the world with those.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
so
any one of those.
You still get 4 more, though.
Yeah.
4 more levels.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's like I played too much video games when I was a kid, so I'm like, let's Donkey Kong this up, you know. Let's level it up. Well, I mean, and see, for me, it's also like personal mastery, and so I wanted to show what's possible. I think if there's one thing I can leave on the planet, it's I can leave Greg, you know, what's possible, right? Because still like just settle, and I'm like, no.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that, like, it's so obvious?
Yeah.
When you really look at it and you see that, like, the 4-minute mile or whatever.
Yeah.
That guy who ran the 4-minute mile, before he did it, it was impossible.
Yeah.
It was completely impossible.
Exactly.
But to me, this says everything.
Yeah.
It's completely impossible to run the 4-minute mile until one guy does it.
Yeah.
And then everybody does it.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Suddenly they believe a little further along
Yeah.
of what's possible. Do you think? I think that's life, man. It's like we need to stretch and reach for what's more possible, right?
Absolutely,
So what's possible? Talk about what do you think is possible? What are you reaching for overall on like a high level? Like what does humanity be capable of?
So that's a good question. So I have a mantra I do every morning now, and so I'm thankful for 5 things. So I'm thankful for love, for life, for learning, for luck, because I feel very lucky, and the last one is for being limitless. So I'm striving for limitless. Like, I just basically want to see how far I can push it, you know, because I think that there is no limit, and my job is to stretch the boundaries of what's possible in this existence, right? Because if I can do that, like you said, we can break a whole bunch of more formula balance. So where's that taking me? Well, I think for me personally, it's going to be taking me off planet. It's going to be taking civilization to being like multi-planetary. That's sort of an end game for me, where I want to see us expand beyond Earth, because I love Earth, and a big part of my mission is to like protect Earth. Like I think like it's an important planet, and it sounds ridiculous because like, well, Earth can protect itself. Well, yeah, it can, but not with humanity messing it up all the time. So it may just erase us if we're not careful, right? So for me, I'm like, well, one of our jobs is to treat Earth as a sacred habitat for us, right? It's our Gaia, it's our sacred habitat that we were born into, and it's like we're just taking advantage of it, just like we are our bodies, and just like we are each other oftentimes, right? And so for me, I see the future of me of being a steward of the planet at some level, but also being off planet, because we all need a plan B, right? And I don't want to see humanity completely blanked out, especially if I'm planning on having kids or family or legacy, next generation. Not just because of that, because it's not just about me, but the rest of humanity probably appreciates that too, right? The fact that we're still like in existence somehow, if we do mess this up completely beyond repair, and for ourselves, or like the habitat. I don't worry about Earth. I think it will take care of itself, and it will over billions of years, it will establish itself.
Take that long. Things like they've done the studies, and like I think we there wouldn't even be a trace of humans after like 100,000 years or
Yeah.
something.
And I see that as being a possibility, right? Like it's a real possibility with the way that we kind of collectively, you know, I'm optimistic. I don't want it to go that way. I think that there's lots of people that are, you know, committed to making things not go that way, and I don't want to be a fearmonger because I believe in abundance. But I also know that there's millions of other planets out there that are like Earth. I believe that very. Not to say they replace Earth, because Earth is super special, just like, you know, other people don't replace other people. But the fact that if our job is to also elevate civilization beyond this planet is what I think, and I believe that like fully. So that's part of the end game for me, is basically being a pioneer of that movement. But you know, there's other things too. You don't just have to go into outer space to do things that are.
Do you think everybody
moving
has got kind of mission in them? That
No,
no.
I don't think. I think everybody, not everybody has a mission in them that they know about, and I think that's the problem. I think that everybody has the potential to have a mission. I think everybody could easily choose that, but I also believe in choice, and I think that some people choose not to. And they choose to, you know, be distracted. They choose to. I don't believe in the victim mentality where it's like, well, you know what, like I was just too busy and I couldn't. I think everybody has a choice of where they're putting their time, attention, and energy, and how much they're going to strive for things. And I know that we're all wired up differently, and there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice that you have to give to your mission if you're going to really take it seriously. And so when you look at the great leaders of the world, you know, of the past and of the present, a lot of times there's a lot of sacrifice there that people see the glamorous side of, you know, this person's famous for something, or, you know, he's done something, accomplished something that everybody's envious of. But there's a lot of stuff that he's not doing because he's working on that, or she's working on that, right? And so I always say, you know, comfort is the enemy of courage, right? In a lot of ways, like it's really easy to be comfortable, and I feel like comfort is also the enemy of mission, because if I'm comfortable, then it's hard to take me out of my comfort zone to go on mission, because mission, as we were talking about, is an area where you have to just oftentimes stretch beyond your boundaries, right? Your comfort zone, and so it's almost like there's a block there.
It's where all the magic happens.
Yeah, it's where all the magic happens. So if you're hyper optimized as a human being around comfort, it's hard to be on mission. You know, it's just gonna be hard. Like, how are you gonna do it? Like, tell me, like, as soon as the first thing that doesn't fit into your perfect, you know, comfort zone happens, you're gonna be like, no, like, I pick comfort, you know, so you're choosing. And that's fine, you can choose that, but that just means that human beings are choosing that, and there's clearly a lot of human beings that are choosing that, you know, so
Yeah.
that means that they're not on mission.
Yeah. You've heard me ask this, but I want to know yours. Like, what's your on the stage moment someday? Like, what do you say? Like, you're invited to your high school because you've accomplished the things that you wanted to accomplish to a point. But of course, once you're there, you don't want to accomplish more things, and once you're there, it never ends.
Sure.
Right? But say you get to go back and like you have an opportunity now to look at all these young people
Yeah.
that are setting out in the world. You know, they're the ones that are going to change the world.
Yeah.
Take all you've learned and all you know. What do you say to them to make it land, to make it actually have some impact?
What do I say to the young people? It's a tough one. I have a hard time giving advice to other people because I don't necessarily think, like, I'm trying to put myself now as the person who's accomplished the things I'm trying to accomplish. I would just say that your beliefs are everything, and that you have a responsibility not just to yourself but to everybody around you, and to just really take the life that you have as a gift and take it really seriously, and learn from greatness. Find people that inspire you, find things that inspire you, and try to tap into your own personal greatness as well, because when you combine that with the greatness around you, it's orders of magnitude greater, right? And that's the magic, you know, that's the alchemy, that's the thing that is going to, you know, transform your life and everybody else's around you. So I think that's probably what I would tell them. I don't know if I have good advice, but that's maybe the way I'm trying to do things. So,
I think, yeah, I mean, you live your life. The advice is the example.
yeah,
Kind of, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you feel the responsibility to your mission? Like,
Yeah.
do you feel it as a responsibility?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, like, I mean, that's the thing that I always think is so funny, is that, like, I get to choose to do anything. It's like a video game. Like, I get to choose to do anything. I could completely just hang out, have fun. I could, you know, do whatever I want to do. And I put myself through like a lot of stress, you know, kind of thing, doing the stuff I'm doing. And I'm not complaining at all. What I'm saying though is that I'm wired up to do the stuff I'm doing, and I'm putting all my faith in the fact that I can transform existence by participating in the way I'm participating, and I can play the game at the highest level, and I don't want to have any regrets. I don't want to be old and say, hey, look, I could have done so many things and I knew I had it in me, but I just kind of like settled or whatever, right? And so I feel incredibly responsible for that, and I think that there's just so many people that need help, you know, like there's so many people that need a hand, and you know, there's great organizations out there that basically do a lot of great work in philanthropy, as an example, right? And I used to want to always just sort of support that, and that was sort of my thing, where I was like, oh, like I'd love to just have an organization that supported great causes. And what I realized is that, yeah, that's what I'm doing now, but I need to have, you know, the resources in order to do that at the highest level, because there's just so many things that finances basically dictate how the outcome happens, right? You know, so you look at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as a great example, and they've had such an impact on the planet, not because they have a grander mission than everybody else, but just because they have more resources to deploy, and they have, you know, really good systems in place to basically be selective about where they're putting those resources, and people are basically bidding to get their attention now, right? Like different causes around the world, and they've been solving things like malaria in Africa, and like just crazy stuff that, like, how is that even possible, right? But that's very possible. It's just nobody's organized at a high enough level with the 7 billion plus people, you know, we have on the planet to basically start knocking off these big projects, you know, unless you have those type of resources. If you're just picking at them as a small, like, you know, local charity, it's frustrating because you might be doing a bit of work here, but it's almost like there's this whole rest of the world that's not even, you know.
It's kind of like you're plugging one hole and then it comes out.
That's exactly right, yeah. And so I'm like, no, you know what, like let's work top down. Like, what's the big problems? And let's have organizations that are like are altruistic, that are good, that are not just here to take advantage and, you know, be predators of everything, and like really come in and like do some massive shifts in reality, right? And that's something that you can do if you're the right organization. And so I want to play at that level, and the only way to play at that level is to have those type of resources, right? And so part of my job, I think, is just to collect and gather and direct resources with the right people, you know, not me personally, but myself and the organizations that I'm part of.
Are you still guided by that moment at the beach? Do you feel like you're
Yeah.
still on that path, that journey that you spoke about?
Yeah, definitely. I get clues all the time that the universe basically is speaking to me through my actions. And so you made a good point about, like, I'm not great at, like, I can talk for sure, but I'm not great at talking about myself. I'm not great at talking about this stuff because it's like almost like raw for me. It's like a little bit like I feel embarrassed, you know, because it seems so ridiculous when I hear myself speak. I'm like, who's this insane guy that like has no demonstrated ability to do anything he's talking about, right? Like the guy's talking about going into outer space, like, sure, are you an astronaut? No, you know, like, so like I have that ringing in my head and sort of like this seed of doubt. But anytime I think about like, keep your head down, just do the work, and the universe will just figure it out, that's exactly what happens, right? And that's the path that I feel like I'm on, and I feel like I'm gaining momentum, and I'm like, I've just been basically practicing in the dojo for the last, you know, 40 years, and now I'm like ready to like, you know, go out and fight, you know, and go out and like actually go after this stuff, right? Get after it, and that's what I'm doing, right? And so, even though I recognize that, you know, there's a lot of other people that are trying to do a lot of things that I'm trying to do as well, we all need to still be doing it, because we're all here, we all have our own perspective of it, and we all have different things that we can bring to the table, and there is no rules. Like, we created all the rules, so let's break them when we want to, right? And I'm trying to break a bunch of rules right now, and just like I talk about crush the status quo, you know, like I'm just tired of, you know, people telling me like what's possible. Like I just want to show them, and I don't want to talk about it as much as I want to just show, you know, like it's more like, I heard somebody say like culture in the East is different than culture in the West. So in the West we talk about culture as being like, you know, what I stand for, you know, it's like, here's my values, you know, kind of thing, right? And it's great, like that's great, but culture in the East is behavior, right? And that's like, I'm not saying that it's better, but I'm saying that I think it's both actually. It should be like what you say and also what you do. But if I'm gonna pick one or the other, I'd rather be the guy that's behaving a certain way as opposed to talking about what he wants to do and never does it, right? And so I think that's, for me, the key is just like get it done, you know, and these things are waiting for us to do. Like the universe is giving us all the tools, all the people, all the talent, you know, on this planet.
And the challenges.
That
we need to go through to become
Yeah.
the person that can
Yeah,
hit the greater challenges.
absolutely.
Do you kind of recognize, because I just see it all the time, and do you recognize the hero's journey in your path?
Yeah, I do now. You know what? It's funny because like I grew up on comic books. I grew up on video games. I was obsessed with all that stuff. I wanted to be a comic book artist when I was a kid. I wanted to be a filmmaker when I was a kid. Like there's all this stuff that I wanted to do. I'm now doing that. Like that's part of the path now. Like comes full circle. It's really funny because a lot of that stuff I wanted to do is all part of the fabric of this. But I stopped playing video games because I was so obsessed with like doing that, and I was like I need to do something that, you know, can be serious. And yeah, like I totally feel like I absolutely I feel like that. You know, I feel like that is.
Because I kind of see like, you know, you go up against a challenge, and it's a big challenge, and then once you get through, it's like movies and stories are very much modeled off of reality, and how we live our lives, and the stuff we go through, and then once you break through a challenge and you get the reward, and then break through another challenge and you get the reward, and that's exactly what film is.
It's like a film.
It's obstacles, and then it's really like I see that so much when I hear your story. Yeah. But when you were a kid, you knew you wanted to change the world. Yeah. And you went out and you went on these obstacles and came back to this realization that it's been in you the whole time. Yeah. And, you know. Yeah. I love it.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, you're so right. Everybody can be a hero in on their journey, and everybody can be a guide in another person's quest, right? And everybody can be also a villain if they want. You know, like we have the choice to be any of the characters. You can be the monster if you want, you know, we have those choices, but I definitely feel like right now I'm on the hero's journey. I'm also in some respects a guide for other heroes that I meet along the way, that maybe I have a few more bruises in a direction, and I've, you know, kind of ran up against a couple of monsters that they haven't seen yet, you know, in this part of the dungeon. And so I'm like, hey guys, like let me show you a few things that happened to me when I went that way. So yeah, so I absolutely believe like I love the concept of the hero's journey, because I think that it definitely, you know, like it's funny because there's one idea that I think a lot about now. It's like the idea of a persona. And so like, you know, you talk about your greatest self and your current self, right? And your greatest self is like kind of like all the best attributes of your current self that are like amped up to like, you know, superpowers, right? And I think it's really cool when you are always thinking of yourself as much as possible like that person, and what would that person do? How would that person behave? You know, what way would he conduct himself or she conduct herself? And so that's like the hero, right? Yeah. And so I honestly don't always feel like the hero. I sometimes feel like I'm, you know, I need to become the hero, right? But the fact that I'm aware that there's a hero in there somewhere that needs to come out and play, you know, that's the important thing for me.
You can notice like a physiological difference even in the way that you sit down or sip your coffee when you put yourself in the shoes of that person, that down the road persona. Yeah. And it always exists, and we never really reach it, right? Because as we do reach it, it becomes further.
Yeah,
It's like-
it stretches away. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's almost like you're chasing that. You're chasing that moment where you embody it fully, right? And you never do, but there's sometimes you'll feel it, and you'll be like, you know what, I'm there right now. Like I am that hero right now. Like I'm in the arena, you know. Yeah, it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah.
It's definitely like there's different types of adrenaline rushes or highs or states of being, and
Yeah.
it's definitely like a state that I'm constantly pursuing. Like and every morning I try to figure out things that I can do to selfishly get back there, because that's where I want to be. Like if I'm going to be anywhere, that's where I want to be.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Feel pretty good.
Yeah,
That's good.
that's great.
Good kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks
let's,
for.
there's some stuff you want to touch on and talk about. So we're kind of baited to. I want to see where
Yeah.
these land.
Yeah.
What I can piece together.
Sure. Yeah,
And
that's
then,
great.
like,
Yeah.
And then from there, I'll be like, Emery, last time we had this conversation, I see where I
Yeah.
kind of, or where we kind of, we can dive in a little bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like that.
Maybe I'll close. I'll close just for anybody out there who's listening to this. Talking to you too, because it's gonna be like 2 people listening to this.
Yeah.
But like basically, I'll finish off telling you the other 3.
4.
Oh, is it 4? Because I
4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, I'll tell you 4, 5, 6, 7. But I'm not gonna go long-winded. I'm just gonna tell you what they are, just because
Please.
might as well put it on record, right? So that we know what I'm working on. So the other one after health that I think is really important is invention. So invention is like the idea of there's a lot of problems that we have, and I think technology can solve a ton of them, but you need to invent the tools, right? So it's basically getting the right tools on the planet or off the planet or wherever we're talking about. So that's a big piece. So again, creating a skunk work, if you will, or some type of organization that basically produces better tools and allows great inventors, because I feel like inventors have a bad rap. Like they don't have a bad rap, they're just taken advantage of, I guess a better way to describe it. And basically innovators are the ones that come along and take those inventions and make incredible things with them. And sort of the inventors oftentimes, basically die completely with nobody knowing that all the greatness that they've created in the world. So I love this idea of, the world basically really giving inventors their, putting them on the pedestal I believe they should be on, and also giving them the resources that I think they need in order to personally take those inventions to the ultimate goal, not waiting for a business person to come in and sort of say, hey, like that's a good idea, let me just buy that on the cheap and then go and make billions,
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's something that I think is really important. So the future of invention, or like where that's going. Education is the other huge one, I think, for humans. So skill development is going to change in the way that we educate our kids, and the way that we educate ourselves and develop new skills is going to be using completely different language, completely different systems, completely different technologies, and completely different behaviors. And so that's something I'm super excited about. But again, these are down the road. I'm not working on that right now, but that's something that I'm really excited about. And that actually gets me back into video games, because that's sort of, an excuse for me to go and play video games, because that's where I think it's all going. It's all going into like, this kind of idea of a immersive experience where you learn things, as opposed to a, binary sort of like a sort of dictated experience or whatever. It's going to be like a full multi-sensory experience that lets you learn rapidly, like the Matrix, like we see it, or in the Enterprise in the holodeck or whatever, right? But that is the future, I think, for sure. And then finally, the last ones are Earth, like basically the future of Earth, like being a steward of the planet and figuring out ways to like protect endangered species, better protect them, because we're trying to do that now, but we're just not getting there fast enough. Trying to protect certain, basically certain environmental resources that we need, and it touches everything, like earth, air, water, the oxygen we're breathing, the water that we're drinking, the sunlight, getting to us at the right dosage. Like all of this stuff is super important, and we need to work on that stuff, right? And we are working on it, but I know it could be better, and it could be more organized. There could be bigger jobs ahead of us that people need to participate in, right? And then the last one is basically the future of civilization itself. So that's the end game for me. It's like what is civilization supposed to look like? Well, again, it goes full circle. It's supposed to look like abundance, not scarcity. So in every other way that we have scarcity right now, it should be abundant, right? We should be getting paychecks. Like, I know it sounds, like everybody talks about universal basic income or whatever, but that's like such like a adolescent sort of level of what I'm talking about. Like, that's like the basics, right? I'm talking like, no, we don't even need to pay each other money anymore. Just like, again, like a lot of science fiction shows will teach you, right? Like, that's unnecessary because we have so much material abundance that that's not what we're pursuing anymore. We're pursuing like completely different things, right? So people aren't working for a paycheck anymore, and that's the future that we need, and we need basically civilization to be elevated collectively so that things like that are possible, right? So anyway, so those are the 7. Yeah.
How does it? Do you ever stop and realize the work you're doing is the foundation for work that's going to change the world?
I'm just super grateful. I try to be really super grateful for the fact that I'm participating. I think like what I'm pretty comfortable thinking is that I'm going to be participating in all of these big problems, and it takes people to want to participate at the highest level for them to show up at the highest level, because that's the kind of person that I'll build myself into, to be able to have any credibility at those levels. Like Peter Diamandis is somebody I follow, and I love a lot of the stuff work he's doing. And he's got several organizations that support a lot of the things I'm touching on, right, with health, and he's got space projects and stuff like that too. And he talks about credibility and super credibility, and sometimes you have to pass the line of super credibility in order for you to actually be able to organize on these really incredible, what he calls moonshots, like these crazy super ambitious projects. And so for me, I recognize that the first job I have right now is to gain super credibility, and how you do that is not by what you say, but again, full circle, it's by what you accomplish. When Elon Musk tells you he's going to do something crazy, like go into other dimensions now, like people probably believe him just because he's just been doing some crazy shit. And so because
he follows through with actions.
Because he follows through with actions, and he's got stuff that demonstrates that. But if you talk to him pre-PayPal days, probably he would seem crazy. It's like, what are you talking about? You're going to take on NASA and other major countries and start the private space industry, or build an electric car again and go up against all the big car manufacturers in the world, right? Like, that's like, sounds silly, like, and if he's at a bar and he's talking to you and he's saying that, like, if he's talking to maybe us, maybe I take him seriously, but 9 out of 10 people at that bar are probably like, what, have another drink, buddy, and go home, like, go get some sleep, right? But now you're like, but that's, again, because he's demonstrated it, right? So I need to get there, and that's my first job is to start doing that, because that allows me to, support these things at a high level, right? And it would be frustrating for me if I couldn't support these things at a high level, because I just don't see them being supported well enough. It's frustrating to see that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for the interview.
Yeah, that was great. It was fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Cool. Okay.